Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and thanks for tuning in to the Dealer Insights podcast, where we go under the hood, bumper to bumper, and just about everywhere in between, discussing topics important to dealers of all types and sizes. Your time is valuable, so thanks for riding along for this episode of Dealer Insights.
Welcome back to Dealer Insights. I am your host, Sean Rains. Of course, always joined, or most of the time joined, by the founder and CEO of Strolid, Vinny Machichi. You can call him Vin. That is if you're friends with him. Hey, Vinny, how are you?
Good, Sean. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm glad that we're circling back around on a popular part of BDC conversation, sales process inside the dealership, taking this decision outside of the dealership. There's a lot of things to consider when dealers are concerned about the cost of BDC. And so today, for the audience listening or watching, we're going to explore that a little bit more so that dealers have a better understanding really of the value, not just the cost of BDC services. Because wouldn't you agree? If you're going to do it in-house, it can add up really fast. But also, if you're going to choose somebody outsourced to do it for you, there's a difference. So we're going to get into that today. And I think the first place I want to start, Vinny, is really kind of the misconceptions around the cost and value. So the first thing I wanted to kind of just crack the bottle open with on you is, what are some of those common misconceptions that dealers have regarding the cost of BDC services versus the value of those services?
Yeah, so I guess the best way to start us off, I think, is to try to go back into history when I started a BDC, and then we rolled it out to our group in New England to 13 dealerships. That was my idea because at the time, I know I'm dating myself, but internet leads were new, and I saw a lot of value, I saw a lot of importance in those leads that were starting to come in, and I knew we needed to build a way to respond to customers quickly and all that, and obviously drive more sales for the dealership. And over time, running a BDC or doing it with a sales team, going cradle to grave, or however you really want to do it, can be done. Whether you use Strolid or you do it yourself, you do a BDC, you don't like BDCs. We had a guy at the show at NADA say, he thinks it's like the third, what do you say, third string quarterback is the BDC is how we worded it. I thought that was kind of interesting. But what we're really talking about is, the mindset of the dealer, right? And what are the expectations? Why do they have a BDC? What are their expectations for their sales team? What are their expectations for an outsourced BDC? And it's interesting because I have lots of talks with lots of general managers, and we talk about that usually up front. And listen, I went to NADA school. I ran a dealership. It's like running 4 businesses under one roof. You got to manage a sales team, actually 5 if you include F&I team, used car department, service department, parts department, and then a BDC, so make it 6, and then maybe a body shop, make it 7. It's complicated.
Yeah.
And so everyone wants that right person in their organization to help manage that section of the business, right? And the better team you have around you, the better operational you'll be, the better and all that. So we did this for, a large group, the whole East Coast. And when I was asked to do it, I reacted exactly the way a lot of dealers do. It was like, that's impossible. How are you going to do that? I just did a meeting with my sales team about mindset, and that's basically me telling myself it can't be done, which isn't my core,
Yeah. Would you consider one of the things that when I'm talking to dealers about BDC, when that topic comes up, it seems like a lot of times I've talked to dealers who think they know approximately what it would cost to try to outfit internally a BDC. Like they've not done it, but they start to see the value in the concept of putting that department in. But then they kind of have this, I don't know if it's just maybe they've never tried to hire for those positions, and then they realize, oh my goodness, these people aren't as easy to find as far as being properly trained, reliable, and I've always thought that's one of the big things to consider. Even if you're able to staff up and build a BDC internally, it doesn't mean that those people will be as reliable as perhaps an outsourced selection, that even if those people drop off or a couple people are sick, you'll never know it. On the like with what you guys do, a dealership would never know if a person or two was out from the team, because you can swarm around and make sure that everything that's supposed to be happening for that dealership happens. But doing it internally, one, it's usually a big eye opener of cost, and two, I think that they're still plagued with those human issues because it's a small organization inside of your dealership in comparison. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it all starts with a lead, Sean, right? So should salespeople handle leads? Absolutely. But are they trained to handle leads? Usually not. We hire people, we put them in positions, we give them a little blueprint, and we expect results. And that isn't, and listen, there are lots of great dealers that have this figured out and do it well. So I'm not making a blanket statement throughout the whole industry. However, I have a new hire coming on. He ran dealer groups, and he also helped fix broken stores. And one of the reasons he wants to sign up with us or work with us is because he almost signed up with us 6 months ago. And the reason was he knew it was going to take 6 months to a year to actually build a team. Now, if you're pragmatic about it and not emotional about it, he's right. It's not like you can just snap your fingers, hire a few people, throw them in a room, and then they're going to do really well. So we've been doing this for 27 years, Sean. So the reality of it is we have experience. We have experienced people. We have experienced folks. And the process that we've been following for years is very consistent. The reliability we give dealers is something that they don't have to worry about building that team and someone quitting, to your point. But then we also, we've spent a lot of time on our technology to allow us to build in the integrations with not just with our phone system, but with the CRMs to give dealers transparency into what we're doing. The challenge is sometimes the results aren't what they expect. We had a dealer the other day tell us that they expected us to get 20 appointments a day. We just signed up with them. They only get 500 leads a month. I mean, do the math. That's 16 leads a day. So how are we going to get 20 appointments? So it's like, a lot of times people, their mindset is, a BDC is going to help me sell more cars. But it all starts with a lead, and turning that lead into a showroom visit, which turns into a sale. There's a lot that goes into that, a lot more than I think a lot of dealers spend time understanding. To their defense, they have a lot of stuff they're paying attention to.
Yeah.
All we pay attention to is that portion. We did some studies at the large group I was at. Average cost at that time, that was 10 years ago, was around $5,000 to $6,000 per BDC representative, right? The other thing we came up with, you need a minimum of 3 people, even if you're a small dealership, because you need to cover the hours. I'm on the phone, right? And then someone else is calling in, or I'm doing follow-up. I'm responding to a new lead and a new email or a new text reply comes in. So this is another reason why a lot of people are turning to AI technology. And I don't necessarily think AI technology is a bad thing. But at the end of the day, AI doesn't understand emotion. It's not curious. It can't tell stories. It can't build rapport. It can't build relationships with your customers. All it can do is kind of put them in a loop and say, hey, we know you responded and we're going to get back to you. But someone has to get back to them.
Yeah.
Now, there are some tools that are actually answering questions. I get that. But at the end of the day, what do you want, Mr. Dealer? What are your expectations? And so you want it obviously cost effective. No one would argue that. But if you're only putting one person or 2 people in a room, they're not trained, chances are you're not going to get great results, and you're going to keep going through the motions and finding new people to replace the people that left. And it's difficult unless you obviously have a store that you're selling 250 to 300 plus cars per month. Then you can hire more than 2 or 3 people and make it run more successfily.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
It does. Something that you mentioned in that answer that I think is really interesting is, you have a dealer that their expectation, while it sounds like it might not have been disclosed up front, that their expectation was 20 opportunities a day that they're working, yet they hadn't calculated the math. But they couldn't have chosen a better partner than you guys, because you guys literally can kind of reverse or forward engineer the math. You could literally ask a dealer a question like that. Well, is there an expectation of about how many deals from all internet sources you'd like to be working per day? And if somebody said 20, at least I know you would say, okay, how many leads do you guys get? And then you would start basically digging in on all of the variables that could potentially lead them to that number. And I think that's important for dealers to think about, is if they have it in their mind, like, hey, we're going to get a BDC and then we want to be working 10 deals out of the BDC a day. I guess depending on market, brand, things like that, there are a lot of variables. But this leads me to a question I want to ask you around when dealers are trying to, I think, accurately assess ROI in their BDC investment. Do you think that one of the better things for them to do is just look at, well, how many deals did we sell? Is it, compare the the value of a BDC deal versus something they do? Do they get into that where they'll like compare, well, these deals were generated through the BDC and so maybe they were more profitable or less profitable? How do they dig in on that? Do you have recommendations there?
Yeah, I do. I mean, obviously I get more in depth into a dealer's business than just handling leads, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to understate this, Sean. If you ever walked into, say, a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks, right, and there's 8 people in line, and you only have one person answering, helping those customers, yeah, it's cheaper to have one versus 4 or 5 that can get through the line quickly, right? Or you could potentially have people walk out and you could lose business, right?
Yeah.
So I would ask dealers, what do you want? There's a lot of leads coming in. Do you want an ROI, or do you want all those customers responded to, answered to quickly and professionally, and obviously asking for appointments and all that kind of stuff? Because a lot of times dealers will just throw more and more people into the mix, and they don't have enough people to actually do the job properly. So we've designed it internally very efficiently, different sections of our business that handle certain things, plus client success, plus trainers that train our people, and hiring and recruiting, and all those kinds of things are in place at Strolid. To me, it's a no-brainer to use Strolid, but obviously, if you have all those pieces in place in your dealership, then clearly you'd want to try it in-house. And I wish you the best of luck. And we're the type of company we'd even give you advice and help you. Because frankly, we're not here to just say, oh, we need your business to just come. We're going to double your, appointments and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'll give you a quick example. My dad, as you know, works for me and listens to lots of phone calls. I have a conversation with him every morning on my way into work. I've been going to the gym a lot lately, Sean. So I leave the gym and I call my dad, right? And so he's telling me about one of our clients who is really trying to get their engagement rate up, meaning we want to connect with more customers. Well, what he found by going through the data was that a large majority of that, it's an independent, so they're selling used. A lot of their clients are from way out of their market. So he's focusing in on show rate percentage. A lot of people go lead to close. Oh, I want to be 10% lead to close. Well, if the show isn't there, then it's on the BDC. If the appointments aren't there, you could point to the BDC. But if they're not closing deals in the showroom, you're never going to get to 10%, right? But his point was, we're seeing about a 20% show rate. That means out of 100 leads, 20% of them are coming into the dealership instead of appointments percent. And I love the way he put it because it wasn't so, I never looked at it that way. And he goes, and then we have this other store, we're at 35% show on leads. I mean, 35, that means we got to be getting more than 35% appointments. And he's saying that's what we really should be measuring. And so when we know that the show's low, he starts diving in, and my people will dive in, and they start recognizing that 9 out of 20 leads are outside their market.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know, so like, what are we really trying to accomplish here? We want to respond quickly, professionally, follow up, all those things that a BDC does well. But we also, do you really want to understand what's going on or not? That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always been after, to try to help dealers improve. You know,
yeah, I think that's really
of just saying we just handle leads and we'll just get you appointments, because that's obvious, but
yeah, you're right though, and there's so much more to it. And one of the things I get on ROI that I think dealers really need to pay attention to. I can't speak for other BDC services. I know yours better than any others in the marketplace. And of course, I have experience working with dealers that have had BDCs or have BDCs in that they built internally. But I will tell you one of the things that I have always advocated to dealers around, well, what's the return on my investment? I can tell any dealer that if they're using Strolid, that what a dealer does in creating demand, that's all their marketing. Like, hey, we got interest rates galore, we got whatever they're doing to attract demand is not cheap, right? They spend a lot of money, as they should. But what dealers don't realize is that if they don't have great internet salespeople, internal BDC or outsourced BDC, that the return on investment of capturing that demand is absolutely oftentimes in the negative for dealers, because they don't have people who are capturing the demand and putting that data, CRM oftentimes, in the right places, so that even if they don't sell that customer on the first attempt, they've got the data and they're building the blocks, the foundation, if you will, for that either short, medium, or long-term follow-up with people that people expect these days. And I can tell people, and of course you know this because you've built Strolid, but Strolid does that. So a dealership spends a lot of money creating demand. Well, instantly, if you hire Strolid helps you capture that demand and get the very best out of it. And it's kind of an interesting thought process, because if you were to compare what Strolid does perfectly, well, almost nobody's perfect because it's humans, but nearly perfectly and in an ideal format, and compare that to almost any other model, I guarantee you there would be misses that aren't found within Strolid's process because of that seriously important capturing of that demand. Really critical.
The meat of the conversation that we wanted to have today is cost versus value. So I just told you it's $5,000 to $6,000 to hire a person, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you need 3 people. You're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000 a month, roughly.
Yep.
First and foremost, we're half of that, typically, right? Obviously, volumes may change the pricing and so forth, but we typically come in, half to 2/3 of what it costs you to run a BDC internally. So that's out the window. Then I would say we have someone that's focused on recruiting new hires, and we have a whole process around that. Our hiring process is extensive, and we came from a public group, right? So we have all the HR training and background around hiring properly and recruiting. Secondly, we put them through 2 full weeks of training. Third, they don't actually handle a new lead until we feel they're ready we have them make long-term follow-up calls and things like that. When they're ready, we move them into the BDC, and we have 7 trainers on staff that sit with and watch and monitor new hires constantly. I just mentioned we have my dad listening to calls, who he knows everyone in the company that who's good, who needs work, and so forth and so on. And so we have that in place. And then we have our ModCom team that responds to emails 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And my challenge would be, can you do all that? And if you can, great. Do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have all that in place, then you'll be successful BDC. If you don't, you're going to struggle. And so we have the ModCom team that does the chats 24/7 and the lead response 24/7, which gives my BDC team the ability to pick up the phone and call the customer right away. By the way, is much better than an AI response because, and I have proof of that with data, that you're going to connect with more people by speaking to them on the phone than waiting for an email reply. Text, on the other hand, has become a big deal, and we do respond quickly to text. So we have our technology integrated with these CRMs to push that email out to the customer and into the CRM. We also have the ability to call it quickly, put notes in, and we have more stuff coming that is involving AI, by the way. But we're feeding AI data instead of asking it to do our jobs. And then we're feeding that data back to our agents so they can personalize conversations. Now, can you do all that? That would be my challenge. Can you do that? And if you can, good luck. And if you don't have problems with turnover, because from a reliability standpoint, we don't quit. We're there every day working. You can go to bed and rest assured that you're going to sleep well at night, right? That all this is being done. From a transparency standpoint, we work out of your CRM. And one thing I would warn a lot of dealers is a lot of new and other BDC companies that do all this work outside of your CRM. So I took the general manager approach of this. I no offense, I'm a little cynical Bostonian, I guess, but I don't trust people. Like, I want to see it. We timestamp, we TO deals to them directly. We communicate through Slack, right? We have all of this data. So if the dealer ever says, hey, this didn't get done, we can easily see whether it got done or not. And so we have all of that figured out. And it took us 10 years to figure that out. So it's not like this all was stuff we were doing 5 years ago, right? But we're continuing to improve and to get into AI. But from a consistency point of view and process, we got that down. Hiring, training, recruiting, lead handling, all that. From a reliability standpoint, we got that down. We don't quit on you. And from a transparency standpoint, not only do we have it down, but we're going to enhance that. So if you can do all that internally, then you shouldn't consider outsourcing a BDC.
Would you say that sometimes dealers need to consider, I mean, all that you just shared, I mean, that's a decade plus. I mean, that's not even factoring all of your personal experience in retail first. And when I first met you, I had seen a lot of BDCs. I had never seen one at the size and scale that you had built and were operating there out of the Northeast. It was, I mean, and I think you probably had that experience. I'm not the only one. Probably a lot of people that met you back in those days would say, oh my goodness, like some sort of awesome profanity to, articulate what they were like experiencing, like, holy, you know what I'm talking about. And so not for nothing, that's really important too. Experience, as I always say, is probably the biggest differentiator. But now you're 10 years in on the Strolid side of being able to provide this service to anybody really that would be interested. But do you think dealers that they appreciate when you're talking cost versus value? Do you think they appreciate the fact that there's so much value in what you've already found? Operational efficiency, training, consistency, transparency, working in the CRM. I think that's probably a big miss.
The challenge with car guys and car gals, Sean. The challenge with car guys and car gals is when I tell them these things, because they're entrepreneurs, especially the GMs and the owners of these dealerships. Well, if you can do it, how can you do it better than me? I can do it. I'm a car guy. Like, I can do anything. And that's great. And I love them for that. And I'm probably the way I am because I spent so much time. I spent 17 years in retail. The challenge, I would challenge that and say, why do you want to do all that when we can do it all for you? And so they can say, well, it's cheaper and my salespeople should be handling leads. Okay, great. I don't disagree with that, but they know as well as I do that the salespeople aren't sitting at a CRM all day long. And that replies are coming in and texts are coming in and replies are going back and texts are going and emails are going back and phone calls are coming in and they're trying to sell cars. So I always knew from the time I started this that this was an expense for a dealer. But when you talk about cost versus value, how much are you losing by not spending money to make sure up this portion this critical portion of your business. How much are you losing? So that's a cost versus value statement. And I would challenge anybody on that. We had a dealer try to give us cancellation, and it was a cost thing, because I understand dealers are under a lot of pressure right now, expense cutting and all that. And so I told the dealer, I'm like, listen, we've only been with you 60 days, and it's new to him too, right? I said, did you know that we scheduled 90 more appointments and 67% more shows in the last 60 days than you did the previous 60 days before us? Not to mention you sold 180 cars for the first time in a while in January when everyone was in trouble, dying. And then he's like, well, it's not my decision. My team felt like they could do it themselves. And I hear that from time to time. And he's like, why don't you talk to the general manager? Because I was talking to the owner, and see what he thinks. So I call the general manager, and he's like, what are you talking about? I love you guys. Like, I don't want to cancel.
Was this a rogue GSM or something?
Yeah. So it's just kind of comical. But I think the owner, when I told him that, he wasn't really paying attention to that. Right. He was being told.
Nobody wants to say,
and I love the guy. The guy's a great guy. I think he was just being told by maybe some of his management team, right? Oh, we're not seeing that much of a lift. It's like, okay, here's some data, here's some information. So the reason I bring that up is because value and cost are they're both important. I mean, I run a business, so I don't want to. It's funny, Sean. I don't like spending money unless I see I'm getting value. But I have no problem spending money when I'm getting value. So he just wasn't seeing the value because he wasn't looking at the CRM of the data and stuff like that. And he's the owner. But the general manager saw it right away, Yeah. So I just did a training on this perception versus perspective, right? The perception of outsourcing a BDC to some might be, unusual, unorthodox. I need to have my own team internally. But at the end of the day, we're delivering a consistent, professional approach to your customers every single day on every single lead and on every single call and on every single follow-up. And you can see all that in your CRM, plus reporting, plus insights, plus reliability, plus transparency. So it's just, that's why, if I talk to dealers, whether they sign up with us or not, they always leave conversation with us saying, wow, sounds really, really good. I've actually had dealers say that sounds too good to be true,
Yeah. I think that there's so much that's easy to talk about at the surface of this, but I don't think people always start to dig and go a little deeper. And one of the things I also wanted to get your perspective on, because I think it's really important relative to outsourced BDC services, is understanding service levels and the cost implications there. And so, to give you a little, I guess, more specifics, can you share some thoughts on how costs can change when there's a difference between, say, we did one answer of a phone call or maybe just form submission versus, you guys can do that, but you also offer like a full service, kind of the whole bad mamma jamma, which is every type of communication. Doesn't matter if it's a Facebook message, a text, a form fill, a phone call, but then also you can tell a dealer, we'll touch it once, or we'll, work with that multiple times over a long period, 90-day period or whatever. And that obviously is going to have cost implications. Can you share a few thoughts on that? Because I think dealers need to always consider that.
So, I think it's safe to say that we can all agree that when a lead hits a CRM, any owner, general manager, partner, group, whatever, wants that lead responded to quickly.
Yep. Stop the clock.
Okay, yes, stop the clock, right. But what is the ROI for responding to a lead quickly, right? I don't know. But do you question your receptionist and what you pay the receptionist, or the title clerk, what you're paying the title clerk? Or are you questioning what's the ROI on the title clerk, Sean? Right? Because I've struggled with this. The CEO of the group I used to work for asked me one time, he said, if we were to unplug the BDC, how many car sales would we lose? And it's a very, very difficult question to answer. but I know they would lose sales. But the answer I gave them was, wouldn't you want all of your customers that are reaching out to you to be answered quickly, professionally, and responded to quickly and professionally in a consistent manner? And he liked that answer, because that's really what we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. The data that comes through, I love sharing that with dealers because it gives valuable insights, but it's not what our primary job is. But we get to see all that coming through. We get to see the appointment set rates, the engagement rates, and our effectiveness to an appointment and all that. I would challenge any dealer out there, other than the ones that are running super well-run BDCs already. I would challenge them. Are you seeing that kind of data, that type of consistency, that type of process? We sell a sales process, Sean. It's not a BDC. We tie in the management team. We tie in everybody. So that's the sales side. Now we can also make sure that they don't miss any service calls. Yep. Yeah, sure, there's technology that can schedule appointments for you, but I can promise you, I know more dealers right now, they're yanking it out because customers are complaining and upset because they're getting put into that loop of terror, right? Where that thing isn't answering them, so now they're getting switched and it goes to dead ear. How much business could you potentially be losing there? I don't know. And don't get me wrong, we're in AI, like I said. I'm just telling you that we answer calls. What kind of value do you put on that? Where we can actually schedule an appointment with somebody that wants to do business with you. And what happens when you don't answer the phone? You're basically telling the customer, or you do put them in the loop of terror, as I call it. You're telling them they're not that important to you.
Yeah.
My dealers are very important to me. They can all call me anytime. And their customers are very important to me. And I know they don't have to believe that. But our whole company's been, and we have tenure. We have people that have been together for up to 22 years, working for us, working together. And so we got that inbound service. Now you can do outbound campaigns. Like, how many dealers are consistently touching customers on whether it be a CSI call or a lost customer call and service to generate more business, or a recall campaign that you want to generate more business, or an equity call, and actually touch your customers at a time when they need a call. Mm-hmm. Not all the time, right? Like I used to tell dealers all the time when I was doing e-commerce for that group. Like, I handled all the digital marketing. It's like, you don't want to hit your customers with an email or call them all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And
it's got to be planned out.
When you talk about caring for, and your dealers can call you anytime. Not everybody knows that. Maybe some people that consume the podcast know you. Know me, know us. Maybe a lot of people don't. I can tell you because I have been in dealerships that use your company. I think probably the most impressive one was when we went to Baton Rouge and spent a whole day with Matt Bowers, which he didn't have to give us as much time as he did. But in about a 2-hour span with him, he went through, like, without hardly taking a break or a sip of water, like 2 hours of examples of how what you've been doing for a long time makes a huge difference. And his people, I think we even captured some of this on the video that we were shooting with him, where he said every single one of his people that come on to run a store that are going to advance in their own careers, they all end up saying, "Hey, where's Strolid? Bring him in." And the store that we were in, a Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram store in Baton Rouge, the whole staff there was very tuned in and familiar with Strolid and super appreciative. And I remember that the GSM, the day we were there, was just overjoyed, because it was actually when inventory levels were kind of still compromised pretty significantly, and they were still absolutely delighting their customers and selling more vehicles than any other competitor of those brands anywhere near their market. And they were attributing all of that to how well things work with Strolid, which just, it didn't blow my mind, because I get it. And you said this just a few minutes ago. I would love it if the whole industry would compare or think about the things you do as a sales process solution versus, let's call it BDC, because we get so entrenched in acronyms. But you're going to have to get people's attention by saying those three letters BDC. But the truth is, my experience in that Baton Rouge store, as well as I know other dealers, it's the same thing. What they're saying is our sales process now makes our customers happy. It collects all the data that we should be responsible for, and it makes a significant difference because they're not having to worry about policing maybe a lazy salesperson. The things that really bring the pain and the problems to dealers, you guys are pain relievers and problem solvers around sales process.
Yeah, no doubt.
And it's hard to put a dollar figure on that. I know you can, but the value to me is far exceeds the cost.
If I was going to tell dealers one thing about Strolid, that's really, really important. If they were to consider working with us, it's that we don't take away all their pain. They have to work with us for this to work.
Sure.
And my people are really conscientious and they work hard and they own it. Like everyone feels it if we make a mistake, for example. And we're transparent and we're reliable and, we're consistent and we follow a process. And that sales process is an extension of their sales process inside the dealership. So we do become part of their team. And we do expect them to do things on their end, like respond to us when we need their help. We expect them to confirm appointments because we're setting up the customer expectation that they're going to come in and meet with a manager. It's a very manager-centric process. So at the end of the day, what I would tell dealers is if you don't want like a really professional sales process in place that treats your customers well, and then that extends into your dealership, then don't call us. It's that simple. Like, because it's not going to work. And I have referrals. Dealers will ask me for referrals, and I'll say, call. I have a few of them that I send to, and they'll be like, yeah, sure. I have no problem giving you guys a reference, but here's what I'm going to tell them. It's not all on Strolid. Like, we all have to work together. And that's huge, Sean. And so when we talk about cost versus value, yes, there's a cost. Obviously, there's a cost. But look at all the value we bring and how much we do that you don't have to try and find people and hire them and train them to do all these things. We do all that for you to that point, right? And then you got to give them a good presentation and representation and welcoming of that customer when they show up at the showroom or service department and so forth.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think sometimes when I talk, like I have this imposter syndrome. One of the things Strolid does really well, Sean, is we don't brag about like all these things. I mean, this is the most I do bragging is on these podcasts. And I don't even consider bragging. I feel like we always are just having a conversation. We hide a lot of the value of the things we do because it's hard to explain. And it's important to understand that most of our business came from relationships.
Well, it's also if dealers, Matt's a great example. Matt's the one that when you open the hood and you want to see what's really going on, it's fantastic when you have successful dealers like him. His own personal story is amazing, and the fact that he attributes Strolid as such an important partner to their success is
I've watched
huge.
His story, and he's a guy who told me he was going to own dealership someday, and he did it. And
now he's got his own little dealer group. Yeah, it's so impressive. I mean, I'm very, very. I've always been impressed.
Frank Mastrovito's another one that I met him when he was 25. He told me he was going to own a dealership. This kid put himself through NADA school. Didn't get sponsored. A dealer there said, "Hey, here's my financial statement. You can use mine," because he didn't have one. And he owns one of the most successful dealerships in New York right now, like in terms of how they can work. And I
love those stories. I think it's great. A question I think, this could be a short or a long answer, but for dealers who, they're like listening in and they're thinking, okay, I do want to choose an outsourced partner. Like they already know that doing this internally is like, they're not going to be able to pull it off for whatever reason. So they're considering outsourced players and the market, there may be other people that are ideal for somebody, but when a dealer's trying to choose an outsourced partner, what are some of the factors that dealers should think about? Not just the cost, but there's a lot, because there are people out there that offer a BDC service, but they're not exactly the same. And so what would you tell a dealer who's kind of thinking, I'm going to go outsource, but what should I be looking for?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. I personally don't know a lot about my I know a little bit about them, but I don't know enough about them, so I would never put down the competition. But I know what it took us to get. I know what we did for 17 years in retail, and then I know what it took us the past 10 years to get to where we're at. And so everything we've been talking about, whether it be consistency, an actual sales process implementation, training, hiring, recruiting the way we do it, the reliability factor, the 24/7 response to email, text, chats, the transparency that we work out of your CRM. Make sure that's a big one, because I've heard a lot of dealers come to us after leaving other companies and say, we didn't know what they were doing. They would schedule appointments, but none of the notes, nothing was in our CRM. They were doing it in some other system.
That's huge.
Which I think is crazy. Make sure that they're not just, there are boiler room type companies out there that'll just pound on your customers constantly. I've had a lot of dealers call me on those companies and say they were upsetting a lot of my customers because they would call them 5 times a day, like on the first day or two. And it's like, you got to be realistic. Everybody, car guys, they want appointments. They want to sell more cars. I get it. And girls. And we do that. And if we thought there was success in calling a customer 5 times in a day, and by the way, the other complaint I heard of that same company was not only calling them a lot, but the different people calling all the time. So the customer's getting confused. Like we build a profile for each of our people into your CRM. And they're don't get me wrong, we do help them out when they're off or out and answer their responses, answer their leads, but we usually have a manager doing that or a team leader doing that kind of stuff. So I know I'm getting into the weeds here a little bit, but go back to what we said and what we've been talking about on our marketing stuff. Like we are consistently delivering a process around hiring, training, or recruiting, hiring, training, sales process. We tie in your store. We do a great onboarding. That's another thing. We meet your team, your management team, your sales team. We go through the whole process thoroughly. Is that important? Reliability and transparency. I mean, when you're talking to them, and if it comes down to it, shame on you if it comes down to price. And I'm not saying they're super expensive, because we're very competitively priced. But if you pick them because of the price, you're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah. Well,
there are some companies out there that are commoditizing this type of thing, and they can't do all the things we do and do it for some of the prices I've heard out there. But good luck. And by the way, AI isn't free either. So
yeah, too important. I've got a couple of things that lead us a little bit to the future, but a couple of things that you're mentioning there I think are really important. One, I always like to remind people in our industry, but especially on the retail side, on the dealer side, is that BDCs are not call centers. And if you are using a BDC internally, or you're looking at outsourced ones as we need a call center, that's when you get like the round robin of whoever gets it in their rotation is making a call. It's never the same person. They're building no rapport, and everything that you've done, if you think old school road to the sale or relationship and rapport building, is out the window, because call centers oftentimes don't have much, if any, industry specialization. They're just basically doing the rapid fire on the phone, and if they get into the digital written communication back and forth as well, it's usually awful. It's atrocious, and it can have catastrophic consequences to the relationship, or more importantly, the reputation of the dealership. And I've told too many dealers, like, you can't sacrifice your reputation for what you think is going to be the convenience of like a call center. You don't be looking for a call center where it's not 1978. You're right. It's what's happened with sales process solution services, which yours would be easily described as that, not just BDC. That's very different than that old school mindset of decades old call center activity, which is, I would never recommend a dealer does that. I think that's really important.
If you want a sales, if you want someone to handle the beginning portion of your sales process, that's what it is. It's a sales process. Our people are trained on models, makes, technology, how to handle objections, all that kind of stuff. That's why the reality, Sean, is we can't take on every dealer in the country. So the competition doesn't scare me at all. I want the right dealers to work with. I don't want every dealer. Some of them just, they want the lowest price guy. Good luck. And I want to do a good job.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, again, I don't want to make it sound like we're super expensive. It's just that, like, when I was with that big dealer group, I did a lot of work with the CFO about cost around what the centralized BDC costs. And his point to me was, if you can get a BDC to produce sales or be involved with generating sales, and you can get the cost under $200 per sale generated, it's worth every penny. So we have some dealers that are down in the low 100s. We have some that are well over 200 because they have bad lead quality.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't control their marketing or what they're paying for third-party leads and all that. It's a volume kind of deal. But we know that, and we can talk through that with you. I don't think a lot of these other companies would even consider talking to you about that. They just want to say it costs you this, and we're going to get you loaded up your showroom with appointments, and then that's it. And the dealer's like, okay, that's what I want. And they sign up. There's so much more to it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Something that you and I've talked about a lot, and I think some people are uncomfortable maybe talking to the dealer or helping the dealer at least think through this when it gets down to personnel and how many people do you need on your side if you were to bring in a really robust BDC service as an outsourced solution. And I've always tried to tell dealers that are, asking my opinion about it. It's like, do you have the stomach to perhaps let some of your staff go that are your underperformers from a sales perspective that you don't need when you find out that a company like Strolid outperforms people like that? And I know that's tough, but I do want to make sure that in the episode that's something that dealers, even though it's kind of me saying it, I don't know how you feel comfortable about it, but when you're thinking cost value, if you're retaining underachievers and it's just it's hard to let people go. Like, you don't like doing that. It's an uncomfortable part of managing a business, but you got to separate those personal decisions from business decisions. And so it could mean that if you're going to do an outsourced source, especially like your company, that you might have to evaluate what people get to stay on the bus, especially in those lean times, because you can't make it personal. It has to be all about keeping the lights on, keeping customers happy, moving metal, servicing metal. All of that has to be a priority. And it does factor into cost versus value. If you have people that cannot provide the same level of value in your sales process as, say, Strolid could, then they may not be long in that seat on the bus or on the bus completely on the bus. So that's always a factor for people to be able to think of, because it's not fair to blame a very capable solution or a company that you've chosen because you don't want to get rid of people that really don't.
I'll give you a quick example. I lost a deal to a guy overpriced, and I was talking to him about, like, how do we save you money? Which I'm sure none of these other companies, or most of them, don't do it the way I do it. But I look at their lead quality. So if it's an OEM third-party lead that we know is notoriously terrible, like, let's not handle those leads the way we handle all the rest of them, because it's going to cost you money for me to labor, right? It's like a labor charge. So, like, we dive into that. We dive into that when we're pricing stuff out. Whereas the other company's like, oh, no. We'll handle them all, and we're going to get you lots of appointments. Like, I want to be realistic about it too. Like, we see data. I am an optimistic person, but when I know that we have, we handle 150,000 conversations a month in here, Sean, and we track the data. So when we know a lead source isn't performing, why am I going to charge a dealer money just to handle them?
Yeah.
And we do. We'll do them like on a one touch on 1 day or 2 day or whatever. We just don't follow up with them long term because we know it's futile. And there's not much in there. And anyway, we do a lot of examination on that kind of stuff. So when it comes to cost versus value, Sean, the one thing I would love dealers to understand is we respect that and understand that. We have spent the last few months reducing a lot of our dealers' prices because their lead volumes have gone down. And instead of going out buying more leads, they're smart. They're like, the market's just not there, and we want to adjust with them. We want to be a partner, right? Like,
yeah,
but you can't do that. If you took the 3 people I said you need, right? Let's just do a little math here real quick. You need 3 people in a BDC, and let's say it costs you $15,000 a month with taxes and insurance and benefits and all that included. You need to sell 75 cars for it to be under that $200 per car, per sale. That expense is $15,000 a month. You could add more onto it, but let's just use 15. You have to sell 75 cars. So if you're a dealer selling 100 cars a month and you got 3 people in there, there's a bad ROI.
Yeah.
Whereas Strolid might come in at half that price.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And we do recruiting, training, hiring, and do all these other things. So to me, that's why it's like a no-brainer. So if a dealer wants to understand cost versus value, if you got one person, you're losing business. If you're using salespeople, I love salespeople. I am a salesperson, but you're going to lose business because they're not as organized. They're trying to sell cars. They'll get in there, they'll cherry pick, they'll find the leads that they want to work and the leads that are responsive, but they're not going to, bang the phones like a BDC can. So you're going to lose some business, frankly. And if you're going to use a BDC, you're potentially going to lose business if you don't, potentially, have the right people in place and you got to train them and they're not good at it and so forth.
Yeah. And
so where's the value there, Sean, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, where's the cost versus value there? We don't have a long enough show to try to dissect like what they're losing and how much, but I think we can all agree that there's opportunities missed. Yeah.
And there's also room for things we're not going to get into today, but because we've done a couple episodes on this. In fact, you probably saw this, but somebody called out one of our AI related episodes because I was going to talk a little bit of kind of future of things happening in BDC. And I loved the fact that somebody on LinkedIn said, look at this article, and they referenced then one of our recent episodes. So for the audience, the runway is clear, so we're going to land the plane. But there's also a lot of future stuff too that brings a way higher level of value into this consideration when you're thinking about cost versus value. That keep your eye on the future of what you could do internally, but also what these outsourced solutions can provide, because there is no question that Vinny, with what you and Strolid are doing, you're so far ahead of that mark. So, hey, listen, I say that's the great place to, park the episode. If you like it, you love it, none of the above. You've heard it. We love to hear from you. The Dealer Insights podcast gets better with comments, questions, and feedback and recommendations from you. So drop them in the comments section below, especially if you're consuming this at YouTube. You can also always drop an email to info@strolid.com. And then until next time, stay strong and solid, and you'll never miss. Thanks, man.